Welcome to the SS Crabcake, and returning to our epic quest to colonize Duna with the express purpose of understanding what makes it red. Now here at the SS Crabcake, we have a couple of functioning gravity rings, so those actually, if I bothered to turn them on, would spin in opposite directions, keeping the station from spinning out of control. We've got a return vessel in case anything goes wrong, and we also have a ground colony that can house over 50 Kerbals. Now all of these Kerbals have signed all of their permission slips and waivers, and they are living here on Duna because they all are very passionate about understanding why Duna is red. This colony has the capability to mine as much fuel as we need. I think it's in a high ore area. And that is used to fuel the science exploration unit that we'll get to in just a second. And this fuel truck here, let's just take a look at this fuel truck. It's beautiful. It's got a little walking platform. It's got this arm on top that will be used to take fuel from the colony to the science exploration unit and back if needed. And we put it there so that you didn't have to land literally on top of the colony and somehow dock a little exploration rocket. Instead, you can just land somewhere near and send the truck over to ferry fuel back and forth. But we have a problem. The science exploration unit was intended to have enough fuel to go to a few biomes, land, drop off some science equipment, gather whatever data we could, and go back to the colony for refueling. But we got too ambitious. Look at them. Look at them. They're so freaking cute. They're just doing their science. Look at them. You see, this is the problem. There over the left, the delta V we have left in this guy is like 400 and something meters per second. And at the time, I wasn't really paying attention. I thought I'd put plenty of fuel in this, and the aerospikes that it's got are plenty efficient. So I was going to I knew I was really, really low in fuel, so I thought I'd just head straight for the colony, not even try and maybe, I don't know, rendezvous with the Crabcake or something. And I mean, we barely even got to turn over at 45 degrees, got like 3,000 feet in the air, and we ran out of fuel. And this is me checking, how far did we get? Not even to the other side of the crater. We are in a little bit of a tizzy. So we set about creating something that can go pick them up. Now I wanted to challenge myself a little bit, and I wanted to make an SSTO. I have already just way overdone rockets going to Duna. You can see that that's not our first colony at Duna. There was another space station we put on the other side of Duna. Still wasn't able to answer why Duna is red, so we're obviously doing something wrong. So we should try an SSTO, right? And I haven't ever taken an SSTO to Duna. I know, I've been playing this game for forever. And honestly, never been to any other celestial body besides Duna and the moons. Yeah, I'm a pretty big underachiever. So what I wanted to do was solve the problem that we didn't give solve the problem that came with the issue of not giving the mining unit and converter to the science exploration unit. That would have increased its longevity infinity fold. So this was the challenge. Put a mining unit on the SSTO and then get it to Duna. This bad habit when I play Kerbal Space Program, and I'm way too ambitious with my missions. I try to be too efficient with what I'm trying to accomplish in one mission. I always feel bad making Kerbals wait years and years and years for transfer windows. And so I try and do everything all at once instead of, sending just sending a plane or just sending a lander to Duna. I'm like, well, if we're going to go to Duna, might as well send an entire colony. And, well, if we're going to send a colony, might as well send a space station. And if we're going to send a space station, might as well send a bunch of satellites. And I try and do everything all at once. So I really wanted to challenge myself on this build to not do that and have a somewhat single-use thing with a very targeted objective. And the objective is to go to Duna, go to a specific spot on Duna with an SSTO, land, pick up our stranded Kerbals, and bring them home with as much science as they could get. We were going to have to abandon the SS Kakin, and I have to abandon the science exploration unit, and ultimately part of the mission of why we sent those scientists there in the first place. But we can solve that issue later. Those colonists are always going to be there. They're very creative. They're very resourceful. So yeah, this isn't the final design that I settled on, and I'll show you why in just a second. As I started testing it, I realized that one, it was, I don't know, it was just really unstable. It was super heavy, and I couldn't quite figure out what orientation of rapiers and nuclear engines and whatnot to get it to fly. But the other problem was it wanted to nose down so poorly, even though the center of lift was, here we go, yep, failed, and then failed again, and then failed again. And then I finally figured out, so this is the final design I came to, and I figured out one of the problems I was having was it did not have an angle of incidence on the leading edge, or the entire wing, really just the leading edge of the wing, or part of the wing, but adding about a 5-degree incidence to the wing allowed the plane to get lift, allowed the SSTO to get lift, while having the fuselage stay pretty much directly in line with the velocity vector. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a whole bunch, or much less drag, So instead of the drag hitting the bottom of the fuselage as you're constantly trying to nose up to fight the tendency to want to pitch down, the wings are doing that for you by forcing the body of the plane to pitch up because of its angle of incidence. The angle that the wings are on, you can see that 5 degrees there. So that was the big discovery I made, and I moved the rapiers out, and I thought the box wing on top of the rapiers, they don't really do much physically for me. I just thought they looked cool. I moved the tail plane back and angled it as well with a 5-degree angle of incidence. So here we go. I basically wanted to just test to see if this design that I settled on was going to get off the runway, and I was really hoping not to have to cheat and not use the end of the runway's decline to get lift, but actually see if I could get it off the runway, and also see if it could get into orbit. This was meant to be just a test flight to get it into orbit. So there it is. Oh, so beautiful. Listen to those rapiers just spooling up. They've already spooled up, but I like to think that they're still spooling up, and Jebediah is calling out V1, V2, and rotate. And hey, we have kind of lift off before the decline. We didn't quite get there. Oh, we're fighting it a little bit. Gonna get aggressive on the pitch up there, but now you can see that the wings are doing their job. The angle of it, the 5-degree angle of the wings is doing its job. It's keeping the fuselage of the plane in line with the velocity vector while giving us that sweet lift. And so now we just follow your normal SSTO trajectory, where you want to fly low and fast, gaining as much velocity as you can until the drag becomes too much and your giant burning flame ball, and then you want to start pitching up and using all of that speed to get high up into the atmosphere. And about the time you get into the upper parts of the atmosphere and your Rapier engines can no longer suck in the air that they need, you change them over to closed cycle. Use your nuclear engines to also get a little bit more thrust as well, and push your apoaps up and over the edge of the atmosphere, and then wait to get there and circularize. If you don't know how to fly in SSTO, and by no means am I an expert, but there's plenty of great videos out there, Scott Manley, Matt Lown, and all sorts of stuff, and I probably won't be the best at explaining it, and I'll probably get a lot of things wrong. But you can generally watch what I'm doing and try and follow along. Oh, I haven't even said the name of this guy. We named this guy the Cheese Banana, the SS Cheese Banana, keeping in line with our Duna exploration efforts, where all vessels need to be named food related with a C or a K, ch sound. I think we had the science exploration unit was the SS Kakin, and that's spelled with a K. So, and that's not a food thing. That's just a funny nickname I've given my wife. Probably shouldn't share that. Anyway, we are on our way to orbit. We've just talked through that entire launch profile, not launch profile, flight profile. Yeah, so I kept it a little bit low until we got to 400 meters per second, and then just allowed the plane to naturally pitch up. I just kind of stopped fighting its inclination to want to pitch up and let it just naturally go up, and that ended up working out just fine for me. So a lot of this stuff is trial and error. Let there be no mistake, this was not like my first try flying this thing. There are quick saves and quick loads that I've hidden throughout this whole thing, so don't want to give anyone the misunderstanding that I am just so good at this game. I'm not. I kind of suck. Anyway, we are making our way up to our apoaps so that we can make a circularization burn. Yeah, shutting down all the Rapier engines. Oh yeah, we toggled over to the closed cycle mode at about 22,000 meters, 22 kilometers. And so we're just setting ourselves up for the circularization burn. And we have plenty of fuel. So right now I'm actually looking at how much fuel we got up here with and how much fuel it's going to take to circularize into a relatively low Kerbin orbit. And I'm realizing I want a little bit more margin. I could get to Duna with that much meters per second. I could get there. But I want a little bit more margin to play with because I make mistakes, and I try as much as I can to not quick save and quick load unless it's just catastrophic. I try and in my head canon say, like, all right, at this point we're in it. If we make a mistake, we're gonna have to rescue the Kerbals instead of just quick load. For example, the science exploration unit, when I realized that we didn't have enough Delta V to get back to the colony, I was like, well, time for a daring rescue. To go where no Kerbals have gone before. Anyway, okay, there we go. We're in orbit. Yay! We made it to orbit with, you know, less Delta V than what I wanted. So before we take this guy all the way to Duna, I think we're going to add some more fuel. But before we do that, we got to make sure that this thing can actually fall with style, actually fall its way back to the Kerbal space program. So that's what we're gonna do. Look at it. Oh, so pretty. Look at that. Look how much fun Jebediah is having. Oh my goodness. Well, we've made it into orbit, so obviously we need to send out, what's his name? I can't really tell on my little preview screen. I could zoom in, but why would I want to do that? There we go. Laudner? Laudner! What up, Laudner? He drew maybe the long straw. Maybe it wasn't the short straw. Maybe they love going on spacewalks. He needs to make a visual inspection of the SS Cheese Banana. I think it's pretty cool. It's kind of got this I don't know, F-35 type wing design where it goes out and then punches straight out a little bit. I guess the F-35 is a little bit more angled, but and it wouldn't have those little points. But anyway, okay, we're back in the cockpit. Excuse me. We're back in the cockpit, and we are going to make our way back to the Kerbal Space Center. So I know there's probably a better exact science to this, but I like to just start my burn about 90 degrees from the Kerbal Space Program, the Kerbal Space Center, and put the paraps, somewhat low, 10, 15 kilometers, 90 degrees on the other side, right? And by about that time, you'll have kind of floated your way to the Space Center. I think I undershoot it on this one, so yeah, depending on how aggressive you are with your S turns, or in this case, you're just complete disregard for Kerbal safety and basically, I don't know, knuckleballing your way through the atmosphere, which is what I'm doing here because I realize that I'm gonna way overshoot it. And so I think I try and do an S turn, and then I just tumble into a completely useless rock falling trajectory. But yeah, don't spoil it. Let's see what happens. Oh, look at this. We're gonna try an S turn. Try a nice big draggy turn at 2,300 meters per second. This should go well when we weigh like 40 tons. Yeah. Oh, not too bad so far. Not too bad, not too bad. And there we go. You know, I should be proud of myself. This is the fastest knuckleball ever. I don't think any pitcher has thrown a 2,000 meters per second knuckleball, so we got that going for us. But the good news is I've still got oxidizer left, so I'm really not too concerned. Just kind of aim for the mountains there and fall our way to the Space Center. Yeah. Background is, what can we talk about? My background is mechanical engineering, and I just liked space. I liked this game because it required, in my head, a little bit of knowledge. I taught myself orbital mechanics before we had all these fancy maneuver planners and alarm clocks and stuff, which we'll get to that in a second. I don't think the alarm clock really works all that well. The native alarm clock. I don't have any of the mods installed on this game because I just rebuilt my computer, and so I reinstalled KSP. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, I taught myself orbital mechanics, taught myself how to solve. I know I could look it up, but I wanted to know how to actually solve for the transfer windows and solve for the delta V that was actually needed. So I would run the equations and find out what delta V was needed to escape Kerbin and get to Duna, which is why I haven't really gone anywhere else, because I spent so much time just trying to run I don't know, it's dumb. Anyway, we had a little bit of a hard time because this thing likes to fall like a rock. We couldn't keep it pitched up, so we sent a formal request letter, a formal RFP, request for proposal, to the air brakes, and asked them to provide some pitch assistance, and they said they'll get back to us in 6 to 8 weeks. And we said that's not good enough, and so they said fine, we'll do it just this once. So we have the air brakes here helping with some pitch assistance so that we can get this thing to pitch up a little bit and not slam into the runway and kill Jebediah Kerbin, our favorite Kerbal, in a fiery, terrible SSTO crash, spaceplane crash, whatever. But here we go. We're trying to line up and doing a terrible job of it, but hey, maybe we figure it out before, maybe we cross the runway and then yaw our way back over to the center line. And that's what we would have done. We would have yawed our way back over to the center line had we not received a call from the tower right now to Jebediah. You can see Jebediah getting the call. They're saying that there is a small kitty cat that got loose on the runway and they don't want to run it over, so please land on the grass next to the runway. So we quickly make a maneuver over and land on the grass next to the runway. If you look closely, you can see the cat there. Yep, you see it? There it went. Look at that. Look at that. So yes, obviously we were watching out for somebody's pet who let a cat out on the runway. Those things should be cleared, but hey, Jebediah did what he had to do. He got the call from the tower, and he accepted the call and made the right decision, putting the lives of his fellow crewmates in somewhat of a little bit of danger. But he's Jebediah freaking Kerbin. Like, he can do it. So yeah, let's shut down all the engines to get that nice sensation of landing back at home, and there we are. So it can do it. It can get into orbit. It's super, super heavy and it falls like a rock, but it can get into orbit. Here's us adding that fuel that we needed because I just didn't like the amount of fuel we went up there with. So we're going to add as many units of fuel that can go along the sides of these Mark II fuselages. I think that's going to add another 1,000 meters per second or so of fuel with the same, quote, dry mass that we'll get up into orbit with. It moved our center of mass a little bit, and we're just making sure that our center of lift kisses that center of mass, and we are ready to go. Okay, so we're going to time warp up to a transfer window using the native Kerbal alarm clock, which does not work, and we'll see in a second why. And we want a nice diverse crew. So we've got 2 pilots, an engineer, and a scientist. I'm just replacing one of the extra pilots with a scientist because, you know, this is a science saving, this is a mission to save scientists. So I think it's going to be best that one of their own kind picks them up and we head out to the runway. But we can't take off yet, right? Jebediah needs to give a rousing speech and a brief on what it is we're here to do. There are Kerbals that are stranded on Duna. Not the same Kerbals at the colony. They signed a permission slip and a waiver saying that they would spend the rest of their lives because they wanted to spend the rest of their lives on Duna. But no, the scientists that went there with them to collect the science from all the biomes of Duna, and their mission met an untimely end due to poor planning on the engineer's part, who will remain unnamed. They are stranded, and Jebediah is now going to give a rousing speech to the crew. So let's go ahead and just listen in to what Jebediah has to say. Huh? Truly inspiring. And so here we are, sending an SSTO to Duna, not because we have to, but because we can, and also because we have to. And away we go. Taking off at the runway, we're going to follow much of the same trajectory and flight profile. So we're going to just skip ahead. Oh, but what is this? Oh no, disaster has struck as we go way too aggressive on the pitch up. And, you know, I was getting bored at this point, so let's just quick load, right? Oh no. Quick load again. Oh no. Quick load again. Oh no. So we are faced with a dilemma here. Our quick load is in the middle of some sort of max queue where the game cannot load it in, and so we have to save these Kerbals from certain death. Jebediah is on this vessel. We care about the other one, certainly, but Jebediah is on this vessel. So we daringly have everybody jump out and throw their parachutes on as the SS Cheese Banana 1 goes tumbling into the ocean and explodes on impact. But everyone else survived, thankfully, and floated gracefully down to the surface and the water. Nice little splashdown, and they all agreed to never talk about it again. So here we go, round 2. We're just going to forget that ever happened, and we are on our way to Duna. And it's probably for the best, because the Cheese Banana 1, those seats didn't even recline. They weren't heated. They certainly weren't leather. So, I mean, it really worked out in everyone's favor that Jebediah, you know, made some mistakes on his approach to orbit, and it, the entire SS Cheese Banana disintegrated on impact. And at this time, there are no investigations opening up as to whether or not he did it on purpose because of how much he hated the flight deck seats. But that's neither here nor there. We have liftoff, and we are going to just maintain pretty flat and level flight until we reach about 400 meters per second. Now this thing is quite slow, quite heavy, so it takes us a while, and we're kind of, even though we have that angle of incidence at 5 degrees up, we still have quite an effort on our hands to get this thing to want to pitch up at lower speeds. But eventually we get to a high enough speed where those wings start working in our favor, and it starts to pitch up on its own, and then we can just trust that it will stay at pretty level flight, as you can see here it does. It just wants to stay nice level flight. It's actually tending to want to pitch up ever so slightly, which really works in our favor. That way we don't have to get super aggressive like we did. And look at that view from the cockpit. This is what Jebediah is seeing as he's trying to keep the crew calm and focused as we're approaching one of the more critical points in our flight profile. We are halfway to 400 meters per second, and at 400 meters per second, we'll be thrown back into our seats like going into hyperspeed as those Rapier engines get their full potential of thrust, or start to get their full potential of thrust, really allow their thrust to just skyrocket. Haha, pun very, very intended. Alright, you get the picture. We're gonna speed this guy up a little bit. It's much of the same flight profile we just witnessed, and hopefully not much of the same flight profile that we saw where the Cheese Banana 1 met its untimely end. But again, those seats were just super, super uncomfortable. Getting some action groups in place so it can be a little bit easier to cut those rapiers, and as the rapier engines reach that critical point where the thrust really starts to increase, we want to look at this drive, this focus, the determination. Moment's gone. We are climbing and climbing and climbing. We're going to let the plane do its natural thing as it wants to pitch up and let it go to 10, 15 degrees. And then as we get too high and switch over to that closed cycle, we'll actually pitch it down to increase our velocity along our velocity vector as we push our apoaps up above the Kármán line. Haha, I see what you did there, squad. That is not a coincidence. And we set up our new maneuver node to circularize. It's an easy thing to say using our nuclear engines. We've cut off our rapier engines, make a quick physical inspection, and we are off to try and find an encounter. And I had the hardest time getting a nice close encounter with Duna as I'm setting up all of these maneuver nodes. And I really think it's because that Kerbal alarm clock was a little bit off. If you're going to Duna, you want Duna to be ahead of you by about 45 degrees. And I didn't really go back and check, but I suspect it was not. I just trusted the native Kerbal alarm clock, and it led me wrong. But nevertheless, we played around and messed around with maneuver nodes and eventually got something that we liked and made sure that about halfway out there, about 90 degrees from our encounter, we could make some course corrections and get a very, very nice close encounter. But we don't have super high thrust to weight ratio, even with our 6 nuclear engines. It's still a giant heaving hunk of metal. So we are not going to do this all in one burn. We're actually going to go out to the edge of Kerbin's sphere of influence or close to it. We might do it in 2 or 3 passes, but we start our burn here and we start pushing our apoaps up and up and up along the line that we are eventually going to follow. But we don't go all the way outside of Kerbin's atmosphere. We wait until we're, it's really just like an eyeball. Wait until we're kind of past the point where we're kind of working against ourselves, and then we wait to come back around and do the same thing and keep pushing that apoaps up and up and up. We actually came out here at about 5 days before the transfer window, so it's fine to do this, and that's what I would recommend if you want to be cool and do it how we will probably, when we're going to Mars, we'll probably do something way funkier and not this very, very simple Hohmann transfer for reasons that I don't understand. But that is what we're doing. If you don't know, it's called a Hohmann transfer. It's technically or mathematically the most efficient transfer, not this kind of looping around, but doing a transfer at which, if you think about it, if you're thinking about throwing a baseball and you want that baseball to be caught by a net, it is most efficient to not throw it way past the net and then have it land in the net, or throw it super, super hard at the net and hopefully it just like hits the net, but instead to throw it just to where it gets to the net and nice and lightly drops in. Now imagine that net is moving and it makes it a lot more complicated, and you want it to basically stop right as the net passes under it and then kind of fall back or be caught by the net as the net goes by. So if you think of this metaphor as throwing up a baseball, you want to pick the most optimum. Ooh, look at that sunrise coming up over the flight deck's window. Nice job, Jebediah. Thanks for giving us that. That was very nice. He looks over to see if I think there's a budding love interest happening here. Anyway, you want to be as efficient as possible, so you only want to throw the ball as high as you need to until it gets caught by the net. So that's what you're doing when you're trying to do a Hohmann transfer, is you are trying to find the point at which you need enough thrust to just get it up to its sphere of influence. And that is usually on the 180 degrees from where you started. So if you're on one side of the sun, you're going to throw it directly up and over on your elliptical orbit around the sun, and on the other side of the sun is where you're going to be caught. And so you need to time where Duna needs to be and where Kerbin needs to be so that Duna is there when you get there. And that is a Hohmann Transfer. And that's what we did. And then as we get about 90 degrees away, where it is most efficient to make course corrections when you're really, really far away, the Oberth effect, which is another thing that I cannot explain very, very well. But basically, the farther you are from a celestial body, the more efficient it is, and the more bang for your buck you get when you're making maneuvers. Kind of like, I guess, like, think about if you're like shooting a gun and you want to change where the bullet ends up. The farther away from your target, the less, changes you need to make where you're shooting, because a small change here will make a really, really big change there. So I hope that makes sense. So we are really, really far away from Duna. We're about halfway there, and we're going to make an inclination change and then also a slight elliptical change to bring our periaps within the atmosphere of Duna so that we can aero brake. And at this point I realized I was going for an equatorial orbit when in fact the target of our rescue was at the pole, was at the North Pole. Not quite at the North Pole, but we definitely want to be coming in over the top of Duna. And I got super lucky with this, where the timing just worked out, where as we came into Duna's sphere of influence, the orbits worked just perfectly where we were coming right. Our orbit was going to be for the next few days right over the SS Kakin and those stranded scientists. So here we are at Duna. We're aero braking, and I realized that Duna's atmosphere is just like a, I don't know, it's like stinking, it's nothing. It's nothing. It's not even worth trying to aero brake at Duna. I ended up just most of that bringing the apoaps in and being captured in an orbit around Duna was all just the nuclear engines, and I had enough delta V to do it, so that's okay. And that's why we put more fuel in it in the design phase in the first place, because I thought maybe I'd be able to aero brake with these big wings and stuff, but I couldn't. I tried tumbling and whatnot, and it just didn't work. So now I am captured, and I'm going out to the apoaps and pushing our periaps down a little bit further so we can get a little bit more of an aero brake attempt here and play along and whatnot and see if we can get captured. And I think at this point I tried to really, really get aggressive with the aero braking and go flat on into the atmosphere, and it's still kind of, didn't really get much out of it. So we do this a few times. We loop around, and eventually I noticed that we are going to pass right over the SS Kakin, our target. So there's no time like the present. Look how happy they are in the bottom right. They know that we are going for it. This is it. This is our moment. And so I get super, super aggressive on our aero brake here, and I tumble through like, you know what? We're fast adopting the knuckleball maneuver. I think that's just, Jebediah read about that in Aerospace for Dummies, the knuckleball maneuver. And it's called Aerospace for Dummies, obviously, because it's not the correct way you're supposed to fly. But nonetheless, we are low enough and ready to start trying to land. And gosh, guys, I gotta tell you, this was so hard. It took me so many tries, but eventually this was the successful try. And what I learned was not only did I need to employ the help of the air brakes, but I had to turn off all the engines except for the nuclear engines so that I could get a constant pitch up. And then at the same time, turn on two of the Rapier engines that would help me give me enough forward thrust to get enough lift so that I wouldn't just slam straight down into the surface. I was coming in nearly vertical, even though my approach and trajectory looked relatively horizontal. The cheese banana just wanted to fall right out of the very, very thin Duna atmosphere. So this was the best attempt. I did not want to try it again. We bounced and we bounced and we bounced, but eventually we got there, deployed the rest of the drogue chutes, I believe, and I was just absolutely elated at this point that I actually landed this thing, because it took me a couple of hours to do that correctly. But we eventually got there. We hit the brakes, And Jebediah let out a massive, massive sigh of, you know what? I don't think it was relief. I think it was boredom. I think that he was so excited to be trying this daring maneuver. And the moment that it was done, it was like what he had been chasing after was finally over. And he just couldn't wait until the next very dangerous, deadly maneuver happened. Anyway, that got a little dark. We go back over to the SS Kakin, where we are going to send it over to the cheese banana because we didn't land close enough, and I did not want to risk moving the cheese banana. And so I thought it best to just bring the Kakin to the cheese banana. So there it is. We saw it in our periphery, and we tried to land as close as possible, but eventually we did run out of fuel, and we needed enough fuel to safely touch down. So, you know what? A kilometer or so is not bad at all. So scientists, the 8 of you or so, say goodbye to the SS Kakin. It was going to be your home for a few months as you explored every single biome on Duna, but alas, it's time to say goodbye and fly yourselves over to the SS Cheese Banana, where you will spend the next few honestly, the next year or so, maybe even 2 years. Can't really remember what the transfer window timing is, but spend the next year filling out all of your scientific reports. Here's a little bug where I couldn't turn on the jetpack for whatever reason, but anyway, had to run over to it. The flight crew comes out to say a few words and take a look at the surface of Duna. Although the scientists are absolutely sick of it, Jebediah wanted to see it, and Laudner wanted to see it, and we weren't going to deny them that. So now we deploy the drill, which is definitely not clipped into the tail wing, and we refuel all of our fuels and stuff. So our monopropellant, our liquid fuel, our oxidizer, we get those all in ship shape, and we are ready to head off. So we are ready to take flight and leave this red planet. Even though we haven't quite discovered the answer as to why it's red, we do have the data, we do have the science from a few of the biomes, much of the science from a few of the biomes. The SS Kakin wasn't completely a failure, and so maybe the answer lies somewhere in those endless data points and reports that the scientists are going to spend the next few years mulling over and analyzing. But nonetheless, we are ready to leave this place, hoping we have the answer in tow. And as we take off, you know, it's really hard to get lift on Duna's atmosphere, so we're heading southeast as best we can to get the nice help from Duna's rotation. As we are near the poles, we do need to kind of go for more of a polar vertical orbit and less of an equatorial orbit. And we turn on those nuclear engines, the Rapier engines to give us thrust and the nuclear engines to help us pitch up. And once I know that we're safe and clear of that ridge ahead of us, I turn on the rest of the nuclear engines to give as much thrust as possible. You know, they're pretty much just as efficient as they're going to be down here because the atmosphere is just not all that thick on Duna. And you can see it was very, very easy to get up above the Kármán line for Duna, which is at 50 kilometers. And we go up to our apoaps, we circularize, shut down those Rapier engines, make a nice physical inspection, make sure everything's good, repack those drogue chutes because we'll need those later, and we get ready to gasp at the amount of time it's going to take to get to a Kerbin transfer window. And so I realized that we should be efficient with that time. This is that bad habit I was talking about where I try and do too much with one mission. But I knew I had the Delta V to do it, so we are going to actually rendezvous with the SS Crabcake. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually pushing my apoaps away from Duna because massive inclination changes like this are more efficient the further out you are from a celestial body. If you think about it, you are basically taking a hard right turn at a stoplight, and it's easier to do that hard right turn at the stoplight if you've come to a stop and then start going again. It's much harder to do it if you just are going really, really fast into the intersection and then try and turn. And that's basically what's happening is we have a lot of velocity, and we're basically having to shift all of that velocity if we're super close to Duna into a different direction. But the further out we go, our velocity relative to Duna gets smaller. And we're basically, at the top of that baseball throw. We're going much slower. We're reaching a point of high potential energy and low kinetic energy. And it is easier and more efficient to make an inclination change out there. Of course, you want to try and put that point at where your target orbit intersects your current orbit. And then, of course, you're going to have little adjustments you need to make at the actual inclination and declination nodes, which we do. And then the final little trick you can do is not bring your apoaps in, or only bring it into a certain point to where you can time your close approach, so that you don't have to sit there and do 20 or 30 orbits to catch up or slow down relative to your target. But anyway, that's what we do, and we've got a nice close approach. So what we start doing is slowing down relative to our target. And you can see on the nav ball, if you burn away from your velocity vector, or away from your prograde vector, it will move towards your burn indicator. And if you burn away from your retrograde vector, it will burn away from your point of burning. So what you want to do is, while you're slowing down relative to your target, you also want to try and move your prograde and retrograde vectors to be along your target. That basically is going to tell you that you are heading directly towards your target. So try and do both at the same time. And there it is, the beautiful SS Crabcake coming into view. We're heading there at about 6-7 meters per second, and we're going to slow down as we get closer. And it's at this point I realized that I had used all of my monopropellant for something else. I don't remember, but I don't have any way to really do any sort of fine-tuning. So I told myself, I'm going to try once. I'm going to try and really, really line up with one of these docking nodes. You can, once you get close enough to another vessel, you can double click a point on that vessel, like a docking node, and that can become your new target. And so that's what I do here. I double click one of the docking nodes and I try and line us up with it, and I miss. And at that point, I don't know, I was thinking, this isn't worth it. This is not really worth the effort. I don't even know why I'm over here. I'm just doing this to kill time, and I thought it would be fun. So instead, what I did was I just had one of our scientists with the least amount of experience, go over to the Crabcake and check all the life support systems, check that nobody left the light on, and turn off the TV. And they did actually find out that somebody left the Nintendo 64 on. So it's a really, really good thing we went over there. And also we left about, 700 data worth of science just sitting in a mobile, or 700 data and 500 science just sitting in that mobile processing lab. So we sent that off and grabbed whatever science was in the crew vessels and other things just left about, and went back to the SS Cheese Banana and waited for a good transfer window. And using the alarm clock again steered me wrong. At this point, you want it's like 75 degrees. You want Kerbin to be 75 degrees behind Duna, because it's going to catch up as you go down and lower your orbit. And when we used the Kerbal alarm clock, it was like 120 degrees behind us. So here you can see us there just a moment ago. We were waiting even longer to get Duna at the right, or to get Kerbin at the right spot behind us. And now we have a good transfer window. We played with the maneuver nodes to make sure we could get a close approach. We did. And so we set about going for Kerbin. And I think I was going to try and do that multiple pass, launch. But our transfer window was already kind of close, and we had plenty of Delta V. And it was getting to the end of the mission, and I was pretty ready to be done. So we just did it in one single burn and lowered our orbit to Kerbin's, and there we go. You see that, and then we set up a little, node about halfway there to adjust our periaps to be within the atmosphere of Kerbin. And here we are now. We are falling down towards Kerbin, having made our 2.5-year or so journey to Duna and back, and look at that celestial dance happening. There's, I think we missed Minmus, but there's the moon circling around Kerbin making its rotation as it orbits Kerbal, I think is what it's called in the game. Anyway, we're here, and so we are going to make a bunch of nice, conservative, safe passes through Kerbin's atmosphere. I was just checking, if you hit F3, I think you can see like the mission log, and something exploded. I think it was one of my RCS thrusters. Whoopsie! Anyway, we make multiple passes into Kerbin's atmosphere until we eventually, get close enough to where we're comfortable raising the periaps. And one more pass. But eventually, we'll do this until we either have enough fuel or just, do it over and over again. I think I messed up there because that was definitely a quick load. But anyway, we pass through the atmosphere a few times, pulling our apoaps down until eventually we can get into a nice stable orbit. And then we'll raise that periaps and wait for a good opportunity to head on over to the Kerbal Space Center. I really wanted to do the landing on the light side, but at this point I had already messed up this landing like 3 or 4 times, and I was done. I was ready to be done with the mission. We were so close. So I just waited until we got somewhat close to the Kerbal Space Center and then just went for it. And it was at this point that Siggy Kerman brought Jebediah and the rest of the flight deck incredible news. The answer as to why Duna was red could not be answered with the data that they had, but it indicated that the answer lay on a different celestial body. Which celestial body, they weren't quite sure, but it was going to require more research. And Jebediah was about to ask some follow-up questions until he realized that they had fallen through the atmosphere and overshot the Kerbal Space Center, and now had to fly back to the Kerbal Space Center. And even though this very, very important question, this question that they have been trying to answer for many, many years, was pressing, he now needed to land at the Kerbal Space Center. So he dismissed Siggy to go back and put their seatbelt on, as he had turned on the seatbelt sign, and told Siggy that they would answer that question in their debrief once they landed safely on Kerbin. And here they are, trying to land safely on Kerbin. We actually had to deploy the same method we had to use on Duna, and it just made it easier. I think when we test flew this, it was just fine, but it made it easier just to have that extra upward pitch, so that you weren't coming in so steeply to the runway. And look at that, we did cross over the runway and yaw back to the center line. Nice job, Jebediah. Everybody's home and safe. Only one of the drogue chutes didn't deploy, but that's fine. We made it. Congratulations. Everyone's safe, everyone's happy, everyone's home. Except for, of course, the flight crew. They want nothing more than just to go back into space and even potentially hope that something explodes so that the next adventure and rescue mission can take place. But there are important questions that need answering. What celestial body holds the answer as to why Duna is red? And how are we going to get there? And what do we need to gather from that celestial body to answer that question? All of these questions must be answered. And in order for that to happen, they have to leave the plane and go look over the data. And look at all that science we gathered. This is where the answer lies. 1,000 science, 1,700 science, whatever that number is. I can't really see it because my little screen is so small. Anyway, say congratulations to all of these beautiful Kerbals that risked their lives to go gather the science that was needed and continue to chase after the question as to why Duna is red. Well, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to subscribe if you want. It's great. I don't know. I'm so new to this that it really doesn't affect anything, but I hear it's great. I hear subscriptions are awesome. This is just us checking actually what we got in all of that science and thinking about what's going to come out of that debrief meeting And where are we going to head off to next? The question is keeping me up at night. I'm waiting for Jebediah to reach out to me and tell me exactly where they need to go. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and more to come. All right, that's it. Bye. Have a good night. Quit the main menu.